afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of our second round of unit releases. You are here for unit K.2, and our topic is weather. Joining me today is Gail Hausman, who is the lead in this unit, and Amber Bismarck from Oakland University, who was one of our literacy leads for this project. So we're excited to have them here, and they're both going to chat with you in just a little bit. Please make sure that if you have questions, you put them in the chat. I am going to share a link to a folder where you can find the slides and some handouts for you today. I'm Janita Vasquez. I am the Elementary Curriculum Manager for Open Syed, and I'm so excited to be with you today. We are glad to get started. So, first, what are we going to do today? We're going to talk a little bit about Open Syed Elementary. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information. Then Gail and Amber are going to walk us through the very first lesson, our anchoring phenomenon lesson. And then they're going to give us a tour, a deeper tour of the unit storyline. So we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at each of those lessons. They are going to share some key features of the unit, things that they're really excited about that they wanted to make sure to point out to you. And then we will open it up to questions. Again, please know that throughout the presentation, you can ask questions in the chat. We will do the best we can to answer those. And if some of those can wait until the end of the presentation, then we will wait until the end and answer them. Okay, so let's get started here. I am going to share slides again in the chat, link to the folder, just in case you need it. Okay. And I am going to ask everyone to please mute themselves if you can, or Amber, if you can check to make sure. All right, here we go. So hopefully you're here because you're familiar with Open Syed, and if you're not, then even better. We're excited that you're here. We are a nonprofit organization that brings together fantastic curriculum developers, state administrators for science, educators, and philanthropic organizations to develop free, high-quality science instructional materials and professional learning that is aligned to those materials. Just very quickly, we want you to know that we had over 450 teachers field test these materials for us from K to 5. That means that they and their over 10,000 students provided feedback for us to help us make these units the very best that they can be. So let me tell you a little bit about our Open Syed elementary materials. First, I want to show you our instructional model. And this is in your slides and on our website, so you can go back and take a look at it. And Gail and Amber are also going to refer to it several times during the presentation. Now, the instructional model is what we use to think about when we build these units. We focus on engaging students and asking questions about things that happen around them in their everyday life, and then using those questions to drive instruction, investigate, research, learn, and figure out what the answer to that question is. Our units are meant to be connected from beginning to end, which means we want them to be coherent from the student's perspective, and that's really important to us. But like I said, Gail and Amber will talk about the instructional model a little bit more later. So these are our units. They are designed for flexible classroom use. While we do have a recommended sequence for our units in each grade, they are also built for flexibility and modularity. This means that You can decide if the order that we recommend doesn't work for you for whatever reason, because of your student needs, because you're aligning them with your ELA or social studies units, or because the weather is getting in the way and you need to do things in a different part of the year. Okay, so again, we are designed for real classrooms. We designed for real elementary classrooms. And just a quick overview, there's a slight difference between our grade K2 and our grades 3-5 units for for both grade bands. We have 4 units per grade level. Right now, we have released 2. And the next 2 are coming later this summer and early next spring. In K2, that means that for each of those units, there are 10 lessons. Now, if you are used to other curricular materials, Open Syed, when we say a lesson, we do not mean one class period. We mean that to span over the week, instructional week, and maybe over weeks, depending on when you teach science. So each of those lessons is 60 minutes. Again, broken up in a flexible way so that you can schedule them in your day or your week, however that makes sense to you. So that adds up to 2,400 minutes a year, which is less than 4.5% of a typical school year. So that means that these are definitely materials that can be used in your real classroom, because we know that you have many other responsibilities and subjects you need to teach. For 3rd through 5th grade, our lessons go up a little bit. We have up to 15 lessons per unit. And the reason I say up to is because that if Gail and team figure out that they only need 12 lessons to get through the learning of that unit, we are not going to fill in with 3 more lessons for you. We really want you to spend the time that you have to spend on science. We want to make it worth your time. Those lessons are all 90 minutes long, and again, they are designed to be scheduled flexibly within the week or your school day. And that adds up to 5,400 minutes, which ends up being about 10% of a typical school year. So again, manageable, should be able to fit in your schedule. But everyone has a different context, so you will make decisions about what that looks like at your school. Okay, so we really feel that it's important to integrate math into our materials in a way that supports our science sense making. We are never doing math for the sake of doing math. All the mathematics that's integrated in our program is to really help our students make sense of the science they're learning. So we do that by integrating lots of math talk, lots of math modeling, but more specifically, really thinking about developing data concepts for students. We are constantly collecting data, analyzing data, thinking about data. So that's really the biggest focus when it comes to mathematics. And ELA, we are really trying to support literacy for all of our students. All of our units include student books that are meant to be read alouds. These were created specifically for our program. These are not readers that you're going to go out and purchase. They are part of the materials that we created. They are all informational text-based. Well, we have different types of books. For example, here's one, Meet the Expert book. We have In Our Community, other informational texts, and I am missing one more. Oh yes, Our Scientists Do or Engineers Make or Do type of books. But they are all informational texts where students can gather information, learn new vocabulary, and really engage in different ways of communicating their ideas. It is important in our Open Syed program that Our students communicate in many different ways, not just in spoken language or even in spoken English. That means that we are encouraging students from K-5 to use their home language if needed, to use gestures, to use drawings to communicate their science learning. Right. We also offer a comprehensive assessment system. And you can see here the different types of assessments that we offer. But as you can see in the slide, what you're getting is an assessment. This is an assessment tool to help you think about how to look at that student work, how to decide what happens then instructionally after you gather data from students about their science learning. And we even really think about supporting you in what to do next during instruction. So along with those, there are these tools, there are rubrics, there are more samples of student work for you to use. And again, always supporting you to think about next steps with your class. And for those of you that are interested, of course, classroom materials, where do we get them? How do we do these things? So we have, our materials are open resource, so they are downloadable on our website at no cost. But if you want to purchase those hands-on materials or a printed teacher's guide, we do have partner vendors, and you can find that information on our website on how to purchase those materials. They are currently, most of them have 0.1 materials available, and the 0.2 units are coming along. All right, so now I am going to stop talking and pass it on to Gail and Amber to talk to us about why you're here today, K2 weather.
Hi, everyone. Once again, I'm Gail Hausman. My pronouns are she and her. I am here to share with you about Unit K2. I'll talk us through the first lesson and then some of the storyline, and then hand off to Amber to finish the storyline and talk about some of the key features of this unit. So like Janita said, this unit is about weather. The question that kids are trying to answer in this unit is, how can we be prepared for the weather? And as we mentioned, all of our K2 units have 10 lessons. So that's what's here. And then if you'd like to follow the storyline itself, there's a link there as well. And like Janita said, we are going to take some time today to think about the storyline instructional model that all of these units follow. And so as we go through this unit, we'll talk about each of the parts of the instructional model and kind of highlight them as we go through. So you can see the different lesson types, you can see how they're connected with navigation moves, and really make sense of how the story builds as we go through. So we get to start with our anchoring phenomenon lesson. Every unit starts with an anchoring phenomenon lesson. And here today, we get to spend a little bit more time walking through that lesson so you can see. But all of these anchoring phenomenon lessons have in common that we are introducing some kind of interesting phenomenon. If it's an engineering problem, that may be the case. And it gives students a chance to share their initial ideas about this phenomenon, and then motivates them to ask questions that are going to be the thing they want to investigate for the rest of the unit. They get to answer those questions throughout the unit. These anchoring phenomenon lessons are also a really nice pre-assessment opportunity so that teachers can see what kind of initial ideas kids are bringing in. So we'll go ahead and jump in. Unit K.2 starts with some pictures. So the teacher would ask kids, what do you see in these pictures? When have you experienced something like what you see in these pictures? You can be looking at those pictures and thinking to yourself, what do I notice? And we would also have a little conversation about the fact that many of us have family and friends who live in different places than we have. And maybe they describe the kinds of things we see in these pictures differently than we do. They might experience being outside differently. What it's like outside for them might not be what it's like for us. So what did they notice? What have they told you about? If you visited them, what did you notice? And we noticed in this conversation that there are lots of ideas about what it's like outside at different times, in different places. But we're thinking to ourselves, well, is it always like that outside? Is it always the same when we go outside? And the kids are going to establish that no, it's going to be looking different, feeling different outside at different times in different places. And so we start to wonder, well, what can we do to figure out if the weather outside for us right now, today, is the same as the weather we have mentioned from other experiences or other family members from other places. And how could we figure out what today's weather is like? And that's going to say, kids are going to say, let's go outside. Let's figure it out. Let's go see what the weather looks and feels like today. So we do that. We go outside, and Janita can flip to the next slide. Before we go out, we do a little bit of planning. We use these pictures to help consider what we're going to be doing when we're outside. And we talk about this word observation and remind ourselves, because we did this in Unit K1. So if we had that, this word's familiar. If not, we're introducing it now, that we're going to notice details. And we're going to notice not just by looking at things, but by feeling and listening too, maybe. So we talk about what these kids are doing and how we can do that when we go outside as well. And then we think about, well, like, what are some of the ways that we are going to want to remember the things that we observe, and how can we share our observations with other people in our class after we make them? And so if you skip to the next slide, we decide that we have a handout that's just going to help us while we go outside. We'll put this on a clipboard, we'll get a pencil, and we will go outside and draw and or write our ideas. So the teacher can take some time and demonstrate with the class about, like, are we going to label? How would we label our drawings? What kinds of things might we draw? What kinds of words might we want to use to describe what the weather is like today? So we get some more directions just to clarify on the next slide that when we go outside, we're working independently. We each have our own paper, we each have our own clipboard, and we're going to be a scientist outside and making these observations. But we do get to talk with a partner. We're going to want to pair a little bit about what we see and notice and hear and feel, and then make sure that we record those ideas on our handout so that we can come back in and then share with the class. While the students are outside, the teacher can be prompting individuals or listening in on those paired conversations and just checking in with kids about, like, well, what does the weather look like, sound like, feel like to you today? And we remind the teacher to be looking not just for kids' words, again, like Gina said, not just in spoken English, but what are they drawing? What kind of gestures are they making? How are they helping us communicate those ideas in lots of different ways? The little check mark in the bottom of the slide indicates that this is an assessment opportunity. Just so there's notes in the teacher guide that say, hey, listen for kids' initial ideas here in this moment. You can go ahead, Gina. So after we have done our outside observations, just note that that might be all the science we had time for in one day. Depending on how your class schedule is, this might be all we can do. And we'll come back together at some point in time and move on. Or we could continue on depending on what the schedule is like. The next step after we've done those outside observations is to come back together in what we call a scientist circle. So this could happen during science time, but it could also happen during, like, a closing circle time at the end of the day that day, or a morning meeting the next day, to be able to share. Again, we bring our handout with us so we can see and hear everybody's observations about the weather. So while we're in that circle, we're going to construct a notice and wonder chart, which is on the next slide. The teacher would have either a digital version of this or an actual paper chart, but notice on one side, wonder on the other side. And we're going to tell kids that the goal for this discussion is that we want to add our ideas, both the noticings, the observations that we made, and the questions that we have, and that these are all, like, early first ideas. Like, totally okay. We don't know all the things yet. We want to have lots of questions. This is great. That's what scientists do. And we'll keep coming back to this chart. This is a chart that we're going to start today, and it is going to be something that we rely on throughout all the work we're doing to figure this out. We remind ourselves of our classroom agreements at this point when we're together, and especially the agreement that we're going to let our ideas change and grow. So some of the ideas that we have right now might change and grow and be different as we figure out more things and get our questions answered. So we get a chance to share, what did we see or hear when we were outside? If applicable, the teacher might prompt things like, well, did you notice anything on the ground? Like, did the weather make the ground wet, or did we see leaves, or, things like that, to help the kids really describe what they saw, describe what they felt, describe what they might have even heard. And then also, what questions do you have about what we noticed? And what other questions do we have about weather in general? While the teacher is recording those wonders and those questions, they're going to be doing two things specific to this unit. They generally are recording questions, but for this unit specifically, we ask the teacher to be paying attention to how they phrase the students' questions, because we're focusing on the practice of asking questions. And one of the things we're looking at is question words that kids use. everybody uses, not just kids, when they're asking questions. So we just give this little note to the teacher. If you need to rephrase questions or help the kids articulate their questions using some of those common question words like who, what, where, when, why, how, those are going to help us in the next step. So that's not necessarily something I'm articulating to the kids, but that I'm thinking about that while I'm recording their questions. And also in this unit, we group the questions as kids ask them by weather condition is what it is. So for example, if the teacher hears a question that's something about rain, right? Like I had a question about rain and then, oh, I'm noticing that you also had a question about rain. Let's write those two together on the chart so that the rain questions kind of get gathered together. And then we might have wind questions gathered together. Janita, if you skip to the next slide, you'll see an example of, oh, sorry, I take it back. Not quite yet. I wanted to say too, we do get to also have a little discussion about how it feels outside because of the way we got ready to go outside. So we're thinking to ourselves, like, were you comfortable? Were you uncomfortable? Why did you feel that way? How did you get ready today before you went outside? What other experiences have you had getting ready to go outside so that you can be comfortable when you're out there? And so we add, again, some noticings and wonderings to our chart about those ideas, about how we get ready to go out. So now if you show us that slide, that's some examples here. I want to point out a couple things. We do encourage the teacher to record the ideas, not just in words, but also in images. And so one of the ways we support that is to give, as part of the materials, just a printout of like little pictures that the teacher can have cut out, and the kids can even help add them to the Notice Wonder chart as they're thinking of questions that use them. So for instance, in this case, the lesson has pictures of the clouds and the rain and the little thermometers and the little wind and the little jacket and all kinds of things that we think kids might ask about, and we want to include those in their questions so that this is multimodal for them. And then you can see here, this is just one way to maybe group the questions. So we got a couple questions about rain, a couple questions about wind, the clouds are in a different place, so that we can come back to those and think about those categories a little bit. And then if you skip to the next slide, at the end of this conversation about our Notice Wonder chart, we kind of group, like think about all those questions together as a whole and try to say, well, okay, I'm noticing that a lot of us are thinking about getting ready to go outside. Like, what is it like outside? How do we get ready? How can we be prepared for the weather outside? And so we decide that's going to be our unit question. We're going to think about that question, keep coming back to that question and work toward answering it. And again, this is like this next chunk, that Notice Wonder chart scientist circle conversation might be all you do for science that day. But the next step could be later that day or the next time we get a chance to do science. If you go on, Janita, the next step for us is to celebrate the questions that we've asked so far. And we think to ourselves, oh my goodness, questions are so important for our science work. Scientists, this is something they do, right? They ask questions, it helps them figure things out. So since we are working as scientists, we want to take some time to think even more about how we ask questions. And so there are lots of words that are helpful to us when we're asking questions and how we answer those questions. So this is a poster that is included in, it's here on the slide, of course, but it's also a physical poster that you can get and print out from the kit. And we're going to display this poster and kind of talk through it, right? First thing we do is remind ourselves that this is an infographic. This kind of text is called an infographic. If we had Unit K1, we saw these already, but if we haven't and we need a reminder, an infographic is a text that uses both pictures and words to communicate information. So in this case, I would read aloud that title, that we have question words here, and the question words are going to help us ask and answer questions. And as we go through each row of this infographic, I won't do them all with you, but we'll talk through one row at a time and say, okay, well, let's see that one question word is the word who. And that if I ask a who question, the answer is going to be a person or people. And so I'm thinking to myself, if I were to ask like who, maybe it's my friend, maybe it's my parent, maybe it's my teacher. It's a person that's going to be the answer to my question. So we go back to our Notice Wonder chart. And we look at our Notice Wonder chart and we say, oh, do we have any questions on our Notice Wonder chart that have who? Like I might read the first couple questions, the first word of each of them. And we're looking and listening for the word who. And if we have one, great, cool, we'll show a thumbs up, awesome. If we don't have one on our Notice Wonder chart already, we might add it. We might think to ourselves, what is a question about the weather that we could ask that starts with who? Maybe it's like, who takes care of the snow if it snows outside, things like that. And we're going to underline the question word. So we'll underline who as we go through the next, we'll underline the question word. So we get those on our notice wonder chart. And we can have a minute to have a conversation about like, what would the answer be if the question is going to be something like, who can help me get ready to go outside? The answer might be a person like teacher, parent. I don't have to have the actual answer, but like, what could that answer be is what this infographic is helping me figure out. So after we do that conversation, let's take a look at our notice wonder chart again. We've got some additional questions on there, and we've underlined each of those question words so that we've had a chance to come back to those. I'll just say the notice wonder chart gets a lot of updates throughout the unit. So you can keep adding to it, keep rearranging, keep making notes on it. It's very much a living document that helps us navigate through the whole unit. So at this point in time, the class is thinking to themselves, okay, we've got lots of questions. We might point out those categories of questions again, like, oh, we have questions here about rain. We have questions about wind. We have questions about like the clouds. Maybe the snow kind of goes with the rain. I don't know. Oh, we do have a temperature kind of question. Like, what is it feeling hot or cold outside? And we're going to celebrate the fact that we get to spend the next several lessons figuring out more about these ideas and these questions. There is one more slide, I think, in this lesson. Oh, two more slides in this lesson still. So we use our notice wonder chart to navigate to where we go next. So what do we want to do next? And the guidance we give the teacher in this lesson is that a lot of the kids' questions we expect to be around being prepared for the weather, especially has to do with how hot or cold it is outside. And so we think it makes sense to start first with investigating how hot or cold we are, less hot we feel when we're outside. And in order to do that, we have a community connection page that's on the next slide that kiddos can take home. And we're thinking about the fact that like, okay, well, if we want to know how warm it is outside, maybe there are ways that we know how warm other things are, not just outside. Like, are there other times that we know how warm something is? And like, how do we know? So we ask the kiddos to go home, and if they can, look around with an adult after school. It might be at their aftercare or it might be at home, and see if they can find any tools or any ways that we know how warm something is, and then come back with their ideas. It's totally optional. We can definitely do tomorrow's work without this, but it's a fun way to connect with kids and be able to bring things home to their families and say, here's something that I'm wondering about in science right now. So that's where we leave it for lesson 1. You can go ahead to that storyline slide is fine. Yep. So here's a little summary of lesson 1. Like you saw there, we were able to make observations outside. We were able to share those observations, and we constructed that notice wonder chart that's going to help us through the whole unit. We thought about not just what it was like outside, but how we were comfortable and how we prepared to be outside. And then we read that infographic about question words too, so we can keep coming back to that throughout the unit as well. So now here at the end of lesson 1, we were thinking, oh my goodness, we have so many ideas and questions. We need to start somewhere. And probably a good place to start would be how we feel when we're outside. So that's where we want to go next. So here's our next slide. I was just going to point out, oh, that one there we go. Thank you. Yep. The navigation there is that it is very important in our storyline instructional model that we connect the lessons, even within a lesson, but connect the lessons to each other, lesson throughout the unit. And that the kids are a part of that process. So we are deciding together as a class what the next step is that we want to take so that the unit is coherent from the perspective of the students. This class has like a shared mission, right? They're all trying to figure these things out, and that the sequence of work that they do is helping them make progress on those questions they're trying to answer. The hope is that if a visitor were to come to the classroom and ask, why are you doing that today? Like, what's this? Why are you doing that? That the kid would be able to say, oh, we're trying to answer this question. So like, we're trying to figure out what the weather is like, or we're trying to figure out how we get ready to go outside, instead of something like, oh, I'm doing this because my teacher told me to. Like, we really want the kids to be that invested and engaged in the work they're doing. And this navigation helps with that. So I think the next slide just, highlights little arrows there. Most of the storyline unit is made of lessons that are these investigation lessons. So after we've had that anchoring phenomenon routine, anchoring phenomenon lesson to get our questions out and start surfacing those initial ideas we have about what we think is going on with this phenomenon, we get to dig in and we get to investigate. So these investigation lessons are going to be things like engaging in the science and engineering practices. And it's a lot of collaboration with fellow students to create this plan of action. What are we going to do to investigate this? How are we going to figure this out? And the teacher is facilitating that, right? Giving the kids space to grapple with their ideas and try to make sense of them as they go. In this illustration here, we're following a fifth grade unit, for example, and this fifth grade unit has the kids going outside and we're measuring plants and we're observing bugs, and the kids are reading with each other some articles because they're older kids. This unit does involve them reading loud too as a class. And so since our unit is special in weather, and that's why we're here today, we're going to talk through what those investigation lessons look like in our unit too. If you go ahead, here we go. Yep. So lesson 2 is our first investigation lesson. And we had said our plan for today was that we wanted to go outside and see how warm it is outside. That's often what we think of first when we're getting ready to go outside. So let's figure out how warm it is. The kids did that community connection handout. They took it home. They may or may not have brought back ideas, but we can use those ideas and we can use other experiences that we've had to think about how we know something is warm. How do we know how warm something is? And get this idea that there might be a tool that could help us figure that out. And so we're like, oh, there's probably a tool here. And the teacher has a book for us about thermometers, about measuring temperature. So we read this book to help us figure out what thermometers do and how we can use them. And so then we practice. The thermometers we use in this unit are really pretty special. We include in the kit and in the materials if you're printing them out, a colorful strip so that the scale of the thermometer is this like rainbow scale. In addition to the numbers, the Fahrenheit scale is still there, but in addition to the numbers, we have this rainbow scale. And it supports kindergartners while they're still developing their number sense, right? So field test teachers were super excited about this. They really appreciated the fact that kids could talk very easily about temperatures and compare temperatures really easily because they were thinking about those colors and that color scale. It started to spark some conversations about counting by tens because that's how it's scaled out. So that's just one of the cool math supports that's built into this unit to, again, help us figure out the science. So the kiddos practice using a thermometer inside, they go outside and they measure the air temperature outside, and they come back in and use tally marks like you see here on the poster to try to find a pattern amongst the class's measurements of what the temperature was outside. And they decide as a class that it's going to be helpful if we continue to measure the temperature over multiple days. Let's not just do it today. Let's keep doing this. And so we start a weather calendar, and the class decides how they're going to record the temperature they all decide on for today on the weather calendar, and we'll keep doing that. So, we have a discussion too at this point about how we got ready to go outside, depending on the weather, what the temperature's like. And then we think too about like, have we had any experiences when the weather is like really, really hot, like even hotter than that red bar on the thermometer, right? Or, oh, what if the weather is really, really cold, even colder than the purple bar on that thermometer? Like, what do we do then? We start having some conversations about that and probably ask some more questions. So we go back to our notice wonder chart and we add questions if we have new questions. And then we look back at those groups of questions that we had and we're like, okay, so we talked about temperature, we figured out how we can measure the temperature. What should we do next? Well, we want to move probably to how sunny it is outside. We had lots of questions about sun and clouds. If we already did unit K.1, we figured out that the sun warms surfaces outside. Even if we don't know that, it's fine. We can still use our notice wonder chart to navigate, but we might have an idea in our head about the sun being something to do with how warm it is. So let's go figure out next time about the sun and look at the sky. So if you go on to lesson 3, in lesson 3, this is another investigation lesson. And in this case, we're going outside really to look at the sky. But you'll notice on the handout the kids use, they're not only observing the sky and how they got ready and how they're outside, but temperature again, because we said we want to keep looking at the temperature every time. So we'll measure that and we'll look at the sky. When they come back inside, they name these kind of different possible conditions, right? Like how much sun, how much clouds, this idea of like partly cloudy comes up, and we're able to record, again, with tallying to find our consensus of what the sky was like. And we put that on our weather calendar too, in addition to our consensus temperature for the day. We also get to read a book in this lesson about different kinds of weather and how people prepare for those different kinds of weather, like choices they might make when they play outside in the sun or in the rain, maybe things they're wearing like a hat or something like that. And then at the end of the lesson, we go back to our notice wonder chart again. We add new questions if we have them, but then we look back at the questions that we had and we think, okay, what do we still need to figure out? We haven't answered our questions yet about rain. We had a lot of questions about rain. Let's go there next. And so our next lesson is about rain, and this one is one of my favorites. As we're thinking about rain, we have some pictures to look at, and the pictures at the beginning of this lesson show us things outside, like maybe some toys or like a leaf or something, and we're noticing in the rain that we could maybe collect the rain. Like if there's a bucket or a leaf or something collecting the rain, maybe having a way to collect the rain would help us be able to observe how much rain there is outside. So we make rain gauges as a class. Everybody gets to make their own. Every kid makes a rain gauge. That way they can take it home. And we make some more rain gauges that we can use in our class. We take those rain gauges outside. We put them in the ground so they can be ready to collect the rain. We, while we're outside, measure the temperature again, because we said we wanted to keep doing that. We also look at the sky again, so we can keep seeing if it's sunny or cloudy or what. And we should say, if our area is going to get snow, if we have snow on the ground already, we also consider whether we could measure the snow, like something like a stick that we could use to measure how deep the snow is, have that conversation as well. We also, after doing all of our observations like that, come back in and discuss how we can prepare to go outside. What do we do to prepare for rainy weather or snowy weather? And do we have experiences where there was lots and lots and lots of rain, extreme rain, or is there lots and lots and lots of snow, and what might we do differently in those situations? So again, maybe we have new questions. We'll add those to our notice wonder chart. We'll go back to our notice wonder chart to say, what haven't we figured out yet? Oh, we haven't figured out about wind yet. Well, we had a really cool tool. This rain gauge was awesome for helping us figure out how much it rained. So is there a tool that we could use to help us figure out about how much wind there is? Maybe so. Let's check that out. So our next lesson is about how windy it is and how we prepare for that. So this time we start off with this infographic. And that infographic that's there helps us, oh, look at these are weather tools. We're using these. We've used a thermometer. Yes, I recognize what that is. We've used a rain gauge. I know what that is. Oh, cool. Oh, there's this thing called a wind gauge. We could use a tool called a wind gauge to help us measure how much wind there is, how fast the wind is blowing. So we build our own wind gauges. Again, this is a super simple thing. So everybody gets to do their own. They all get to take one home and continue to measure weather at home, but we have enough that we have some in the classroom too. We take those outside, we go observe the wind. We observe the rain, if there's any rain in our rain gauge, we observe the temperature, and we observe the sun and clouds again. So we have all that data to put on our weather calendar when we come back inside. We also have a discussion about like, oh, are there things we do differently to prepare to go outside when it's windy? Or if there's a lot of wind, if it's really strong wind, do we prepare differently for that? And we might have some new questions to add to our notice wonder chart. But this time, when we go back to that notice wonder chart, we're going to say, oh, we have done a lot of investigations. We have figured out a lot about rain and about wind and about sun and about temperature. So it feels like we might be ready to think more generally about like, what is our weather usually like? We have a lot of information on our weather calendar that we could probably make some sense of. So that brings us to our first putting pieces together lesson. The putting pieces together lesson they happen usually multiple times, at least once at the end of the unit, but often at this like kind of midpoint in the unit, where we get to take stock and we say to ourselves, can we like start to explain things? Can we build out our explanation of what we're trying to figure out? Can we answer our questions yet? And we're connecting all those different pieces of ideas that we figured out in those investigation lessons into some kind of more complete explanation, be able to answer our unit question maybe. In this case, we're looking to see how we can be prepared for the weather. What do we know about our weather and how can we prepare for it? So our putting pieces together lesson is lesson 6. And in this case, we are going to look back at that weather calendar that we have been collecting data on for several science lessons worth of, maybe even days that we didn't have a science lesson. We still got to go outside and measure the weather. We've got a lot of information here. We need to try to make sense of it. If we're trying to figure out what our weather is usually like, there's probably some ways we can do that. So we work together in groups, teacher demonstration and whatnot, to put together picture graphs. And these picture graphs gives us a chance to count how many times we had a certain temperature, how many times we had cloudy or partly cloudy. And we each have a weather condition picture graph that helps us then find these patterns over the time that we've been collecting all of our information. We also get to read a book in this lesson about other kids in other communities and how they get ready to go outside and what their weather is usually like. So this is a nice chance for us to really, again, kind of put a little culminating like, oh, we figured out stuff. We know a lot of cool things. At this point, we think we're probably ready to share what we figured out. And we're going to do that little sharing kind of thing at the beginning of the next lesson and also try to figure out like, okay, but like, what do we know about the weather in the future? What's coming, right? Is there some way we can have some notice about what the weather's going to be like? So at this point, I will hand us off to Amber to talk about the next couple investigation lessons.
Thanks, Gail. I'm Amber Bismack. I'm one of the leads for kindergarten, first and second grade. So I'm excited to tell you about the last half of the unit here. So kind of building on all that Gail shared and what we figured out so far in this unit, and what we figured out about our usual weather, we're kind of now transitioning into continuing what we figured out, kind of what we want to share about what we figured out, and then other weather patterns that we might be noticing. So then in lesson 7, building on lesson 6, what Gail just shared about looking at the patterns we noticed on our weather calendar, now we have a chance to actually write and draw about what those patterns are, about what the weather usually is and how we usually prepare for the weather. So kind of building on what we did in lesson 6, we're going to actually write and draw that. And then from there, we're going to start to ask questions and say, well, this is what we've noticed in our usual weather, but are there ways that other people would communicate about weather and what that might look like? And that gets us into wanting to learn about how some scientists actually communicate about the weather. And we end up reading this book, Meet the Meteorologist, Betty Davis. And we get to learn about her work as a meteorologist and how she actually both develops weather forecasts, but then actually communicates weather forecasts. And it starts to get us wondering like, wow, that's really neat. Are there other ways that we can communicate the weather and what weather might be like and how we might need to know what the forecast is or how to prepare for it or what the forecast is to be able to prepare for it. And so that gets us into the need to actually want to start planning a community service announcement that we can actually share what we're learning about the weather and what the weather might be and different types of weather with others that we care about to help keep them safe and like, make sure that they're prepared for the weather. That leads us then into lesson 8. And in lesson 8, from there, we're going to actually start wondering like, wow, there's a lot of things that we've been talking a lot about what the weather usually is, what we've noticed, but there's other kinds of weather that meteorologists have tended to share with us that maybe it's more unusual. In some cases, unsafe weather. And that kind of brings us some questions about what questions do we have about unusual weather, unsafe weather, and what that might be like? And we should probably figure that out. And so that gets us a chance to actually read this book about what is severe weather. And in particular, being in kindergarten, we really want to focus on more localized severe weather. So as a teacher, there's supports in the curriculum that help you recognize that even though this book has different types of severe weather, you should only be focusing on the local severe weather and what's specific to your students. And it actually also provides supports for how to have those conversations with students because sometimes it might be scary for young kids, but we don't want to assume that it's scary. So we read the book, we have these opportunities to actually talk about this local severe weather, share our experiences and what we might be feeling with that. Then think about like, wow, we've learned a lot about different local severe weather and our own experiences. Let's actually have a chance to draw it and what that might be like and how we might be thinking about getting ready for severe weather. So a chance to hear in lesson 8 more just kind of like drawing and writing what we know or what we learned about the severe weather, which then gets us into lesson 9, where we have a chance to start thinking about, okay, well, now that we know about different types of local severe weather, how do we prepare for different types of local severe weather? And we can revisit our book about that, which talks about how to prepare about local severe weather. We actually do a card sort to be able to start comparing what the severe weather is and how we might want to prepare for it. Because we really want to focus on how we get ready for severe weather to keep ourselves and our those that we care about nice and safe. So we do our card sort, we figure out some of the ways we prepare for our severe weather, and then this is our chance to actually really record that and write that down so we have and draw pictures about it. So not just what the weather is, but then how we actually prepare for it so we can share it with others. Which then brings us into lesson 10, where we have this chance to actually do the sharing, just like our meteorologist is, we'll get a chance to do this. And so this is our final putting the pieces together lesson, where we're really starting to put together not just the last part of the unit, but the whole unit. Like, what have we figured out so far, like throughout the whole unit about our usual weather, or unusual weather? How might we be able to use this to help us prepare for the weather, help others prepare for the weather, and keep everyone safe? And so in this lesson 10, what we're able to do is we're able to kind of revisit from the book how the meteorologist actually prepared for communicated, I'm sorry, not prepared, how the meteorologist communicated weather, the weather forecasts, and then be able to revisit our community service announcement where we've been working on pieces of it in the past few lessons, lesson 7, 8, and 9. And here what we're able to do is start looking at how we can put those together. So we have a chance to put those pieces together in this community service announcement. We actually, as a class, decide collaboratively on this community service announcement communication checklist, because it's great to make a community service announcement, but the whole point of this is that we want to do is we want to share this, what we've learned and figured out, with all those that we care about. And so we want to make sure that when we're sharing it, we're sharing all the information that we have, we're communicating it really clearly. And so we have this conversation to identify all those things that we want to do when we're actually communicating our community service announcement with others. So I decide on our checklist what we want to include. We have a chance to practice it with each other. And then the most culminating piece and exciting part, we actually get to share it. So this is where we bring in those that we care about, invited guests, whether it's the principal or another class, or even our friends or family or other community members, any meteorologists we might know, bring them in and actually have a chance to actually share with them all that we figured out about the usual weather, the unusual weather, and how we prepare for all of that throughout the unit and actually across all of our data that we've collected, which has been great. So that kind of wraps up the whole unit and what it looks like for kindergartners to work through this and kind of make sense of this unit throughout. What we want to do now is kind of highlight a few key pieces and like important features within this unit that we've really tried to emphasize for these kindergartners, particularly as their second round working through Open SciEd here. So one of the first things that we want to do is in this unit, because we're talking about the weather, one of the exciting things about weather is actually the tools and what we use to measure weather. So we can actually look at our phone all the time. I'm sure we've seen mom and dad or aunt and uncle or grandma and grandpa look at a phone. That's the weather, but how does it actually get there? Like, how does it end up on the phone? And so it really brings this question, this unit, about the tools to actually gather that weather data. And so one of the things that we've worked really hard in this unit to do is to actually give space and time for children to actually develop these tools and practice using the tools over and over and over again so they can see not just what the weather is, but how we actually collect that data, then to then be able to use that information, that data, to be able to answer our question later. And with some of the tools, they're also able to bring them home so they can do this with family members and trusted adults as well. So it provides a nice, we try and work really hard to provide a connection between what they're doing in the classroom with these tools, but also what they're able to do at home with their trusted adults and family members. And then for the next one of the other things kind of building on the data that they've collected with those tools is really focusing on helping them analyze data. So this is a pretty complex task, brings a lot of math in. As you can see, we have some of the graphs and charts here that they've been making throughout the unit. So we really want to focus in on this unit by helping the students actually not just collect the weather data, but most importantly, then analyze that data to figure out the patterns in the local weather. So we're really trying to focus on that pattern piece. And to get to the patterns, them trying to be able to analyze the data across time, to be able to note across our single class, but also across time to be able to notice those patterns. So this focus on data analysis is really key in a single lesson when we look at patterns across our single class set of class data, but also data analysis to identify patterns across multiple sets of data over time that we've been collecting on our weather calendar and such, and then being able to compare it for what it means for the wind or the cloudiness or the temperature and so on. And then another key piece here, like we had talked about earlier, is this idea of community connections. So because weather is something that we all experience every single day, when we think about how we're going to get ready in the morning, what we're going to wear. I can't tell you how many times my kids have asked, how cold is it going to be? How warm is it going to be? How should I dress for the weather, right? So it's an everyday thing. And so we really wanted to emphasize in this unit how to help children connect to their families and their experiences within their community. So we had the community connection early on, and they were able to talk with their family members about how, and trusted adults about how they actually prepare for and get ready for their weather and whatnot early in the unit. But then the whole end of the unit is actually focused on this community service announcement with a real intentionality for how we communicate and share what we figured out. Because science is great to learn, but the whole point of science is to share it and like share with others and spread all that we've learned, right? And help educate others so that we can all learn from what we figured out. And so we really want to emphasize that here in this unit because weather is such a relatable topic for so many people, for all of us every day. So ending the unit with a community service announcement was really intentional. Intentional about having space to also bring in invited guests to be able to talk about how to help people keep people safe and comfortable in different types of weather. So those are kind of the key features that we want to talk about in this unit. But now that you've had a chance to see the whole unit itself, we just want to touch a little bit on kind of the more standards-based notion, like focuses of the unit and where we're trying to emphasize here. So in particular, the two performance expectations that we're emphasizing this unit for kindergarten are within earth and space science. So we have one, use and share observations of local weather conditions to describe patterns over time. So that's really focused on the first part of the unit that Gail was talking about, really making those observations, sharing them, and then identifying those patterns as we talked about using all that data analysis. And the other performance expectation is ask questions to obtain information about the purpose of weather forecasting to prepare for and respond to severe weather, specifically local weather. So that's focused in a bit more on the later lessons. However, that focus on asking questions to obtain information is something that we really do throughout the entire unit with those question words in the first lesson, and then drawing on them in every single lesson as we keep coming back to what questions do we have about another type of weather condition? What questions do we have about unusual weather, unsafe weather? All to get up to this idea of like, well, how do we prepare for it? How do we prepare for severe weather, particularly what we might experience in our local community, to try and get to that second performance expectation, somewhat throughout the unit, but definitely toward the end of the unit. And then in particular for this unit, this K.2 unit, we're intentionally developing specific science and engineering practices. Not surprisingly, asking questions is a predominant piece of this unit as we start off right from lesson 1, where they're doing that with the question words and so on throughout the rest of the unit. So that's a key piece here. And definitely also analyzing and interpreting data. And we do that a lot through using mathematics. As you saw with the graphs, with the counting and the tallying, that was really intentional with our math partners on the team to really try and incorporate that mathematics for the service of science sense making when we're thinking about how we're analyzing and interpreting our data throughout it. So those were very intentional. And then, of course, the obtaining, evaluating, communicating information. We do a lot of all of those pieces throughout the unit and the different texts that we read as we obtain information about different weather tools or types of weather or severe weather, but then certainly the communicating information. We do that with the community service announcement with each other in class. And then, of course, with the community service announcement at the end of the unit, we do that a lot, emphasize that a lot. So that's a pretty key piece, pretty key science and engineering practice in this unit. And then for the cross-cutting concepts, we focus a lot on patterns, of course, as you saw a lot. We're looking at patterns across our class data and patterns across multiple sets of data over time with our weather calendar. But we also look somewhat at cause and effect when thinking about, well, this is the weather. That weather causes us to actually prepare in certain ways. So this relationship between the cause of the weather into the effect of the preparation and what that might look like. Also, like the weather forecast, cause the weather forecast is the cause for the effect of us preparing in certain ways based on that forecast, right? So we're really kind of emphasizing both the patterns and the cause and effect in this unit across all of the different lessons. All right, so at this point, I will hand it back to Janita for any questions that you might have.
All right, everybody. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but if you have some questions, please drop them in the chat now, or you can also unmute yourself and ask a question if you have one for our writing team. That is something that we're talking about, Tori, whether the teacher edition, the teacher guide will be available in Spanish. We know it's an ask. Um, it's come up more and more in elementary than with all of our other programs. So eventually we will probably do that. Our first priority will be to translate all of our all of our student materials. Valerie, we will not be translating into French, but all of our materials are editable. So, because you have access to change them however you need to after you download them, you are able to translate if you can, or make use of folks in your district who may be able to do that work for you.
Can I answer the summative assessment question?
Yes, please do.
So in this unit, being a kindergarten unit, the summative assessment is a two-part kind of a thing. There is a tool that Janita gave you just a little preview of, but there are tools in the unit that help the teacher collect evidence of student sense making throughout several lessons, because so much of the work that we're doing is discussion based or things I might observe the kids doing during a lesson. And it's not like I'm going to have the kindergartners write a test that they're going to answer tests for a summative. So I'm going to use what I figured out from kids and the kind of notes I'm taking anecdotally over the course of several lessons to say to myself, okay, who do I feel like is already showing me evidence that they've addressed these performance expectations, and who might I need to check in with even more when I get to those putting pieces together lessons. The first one in lesson 6, there is that handout where the kiddos are describing what their weather's usually like. And that is a summative assessment moment where the teacher there's guidance in the materials about how you can use that summatively. And then same thing with the community service announcement. The kids have put together several pieces of information about severe weather and how they're communicating about preparing for the weather. Those are pieces that you can also use summatively, again, in combination with notes you're taking throughout the lessons, based on discussions and things you're observing amongst the students. For all of our lessons program wide, for all of our units program wide, there are summative assessment opportunities that look different depending on the grade level, right? So in K.1.2, you're going to see that following student sense making kind of tool to help you look and listen for kids' ideas throughout, and then also pair that with some kind of an assessment moment at those usually midway and the unit points. And then they do look more like transfer task, kind of often written, but not always, kinds of assessments in upper grades.
Thank you.
Mm.
Right. And Jen did ask about the slides in our middle school and high school materials. There are teacher notes in our slides currently, and this is not something we're planning to do for elementary school, only because there is so much in our teacher guide that is really important. We've just chosen not to do that this time around.
Always modify the slides yourself after you're done.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Gail and Amber for being here with us today. They, of course, know these units inside and out, and they were able to share fantastic information with us today. So thank you all very much.